Thank you very much. I really appreciate being invited here. I'm from the much maligned state of Colorado. I was happy to see Oregon got a bashing. My name is Ray Hagler, and I teach at the Colorado State University. My area of study is employment relations. So far today, I haven't heard very much about that, but I know there's a strong union presence in the field, and so I'm going to try to say some good things about it. Actually, what I would like to say about it is, as in many other areas, there's this void created by the interaction of federal and state law. That's particularly true, I believe, in the field of employment regulation, where you have federal statutes like the Americans with Disabilities Act, and then you may have state action along those lines. But my primary concern, what I'd like to focus on today, is the National Labor Relations Act, because that's a piece of legislation which actually is different than these other pieces of legislation in that everything is covered by the National Labor Relations Act. The federal law preempts state law. So in the state of Washington, you do have public sector unions. That's regulated because the National Labor Relations Act doesn't cover them. Also, agriculture is excluded from the NLRA, so that's not covered. I was reminded, it's a beautiful place. I'm happy to be back here. I came up here about 20 years ago, and I was doing training sessions for the Washington State Department of Transportation out in Silverdale. Really a very nice venue. And it occurred to me as I'm listening to everything here today that if somebody told those guys 20 years ago that marijuana would be legal in Washington, they never would have believed it. And that was despite the fact that after a week in that session, they had so much alcohol in the break room, it looked like they called the liquor store and said, "Bring it over." Now, with those two exceptions, preemptive federal law, but it's not clear that federal law is going to apply to this industry. There is an NLRB attorney ruling that says the NLRA will apply, but I think that ruling it's tentative. I would suggest that it will actually take 5 years of litigation to find out whether or not the National Labor Relations Act does or does not apply to the cannabis industry. So what I suggest in the meantime is that labor relations might profit from the history of labor relations in the United States. Prior to 1935 and the National Labor Relations Act, employers had liberty to do basically what they wanted to in the field of industrial relations, and there sprang up this phenomenon of what was called employee representation plans or works councils. These things came back into the news with the UAW Volkswagen issue down in Tennessee last year. And basically, these works councils were transplanted from the United States, and then they came back to the United States. The problem with them was that employer-dominated work groups were made illegal in 1935 under the National Labor Relations Act. But if the NLRA doesn't apply, and it's not clear that they do, there would be no reason that labor could not engage with employers along those lines. Here's why I suggest it might be profitable. First of all, a collective bargaining relationship demands exclusive representation and usually leads to contract negotiations. Works councils are a little more flexible. You can have union representation on the works councils. You can participate in drawing up work relationships, agreements. They're binding contracts. You don't have to worry about enforcing them through some federal agency. So I think it's a possibility that might add a little further dimension of stability, if you will, to the industry. Why? Because as all this uncertainty unfolds, I think it behooves, in the spirit of cooperation, employers and employees to work together. And this is a way that it can be done without a lot of formality and without a lot of red tape and bureaucracy. I was also struck by the fact that now there is an issue. I mean, some states have legalized marijuana, some states have legalized medical marijuana, some states don't want to play in the game at all. But I think the general trend is going to be toward further legalization and further expansion. And as that happens, how are these other states going to deal with their issues? And I was struck by the idea that Oregon, by not having any taxation, could compete successfully with Southern Washington. And if that turns out to be the case, think about states like Arkansas and Mississippi growing acres of marijuana and not charging taxes or anything else related to it. So, to return to the main idea here, I think as this industry evolves, it really is in the best interest of everybody to have some sort of stable, formal relationship between employees and employers. And I have to say, up to this point today, there hasn't been very much discussion of workers in the industry, and I think that's an important component of it. So with that, I'll stop talking.
All right. Hello, my name is Anndrea Hermann, and it's a pleasure to be back again this year. So just want to thank everybody for the planning committee and for the opportunity to come and share my knowledge base once again here in the Pacific Northwest. Just to recap, to start, I want to make sure everybody jots down votehemp.com and go up to that Take Action tab. As Aw said, right now it is very important that we push for S134. This is sitting in the Senate right now and essentially removes industrial hemp as a controlled substance and hands it over to the states to then go forward and promulgate the rules. So please go to votehemp.com, go to that Take Action tab, and please take action. I just want to give a big congratulations to the state of Washington. As of 2015, you guys were number 5 in taking action for industrial hemp. Oh, yeah, it's huge. It goes to the great success of our great friend Joy over here, who is a super trooper on fighting for the policy here. So it was California, Texas, Virginia, Oregon, and Washington. And right now we currently have 27 states that have legally defined industrial hemp. And in 2015 we had 9 states conduct some sort of legal cultivation of industrial hemp in accordance with Section 7606. So that's 9 states in 2015. And this year we're probably going to be looking upward of more than like 20 states. And those are all on the go right now of getting those DEA import permits. And one of the things that sort of shed light on earlier, as Tom was saying, is that relationship change between us and the cannabis industry, including marijuana, industrial hemp, adult use, recreation, whatever you want to call it. In that case, that relationship dynamic change. I remember setting up the hemp picnic, which was a silent, non-violent protest across from the DEA's office in Springfield, Missouri, way back when I was in high school now, so over 20 years ago, setting up that. And now actually, once again, if we could go out and buy the DE agent a beer, I would. We couldn't, but we hugged also. And I love that idea. It's great. And I love the fact that when I send a message or I drop a call, Andy, my agent, is calling me back probably within 30 minutes. I love the fact now that when I go through Customs Border Patrol, they want to ask me and engage me in questions about what's going on in our industry. And that shows that shift in the dynamic when 4 or 5 years ago, as soon as I said I worked with industrial hemp, they said, "You see the little room? Go there." And I went there with honor, and I educated the whole time I was in there. And at the end of that conversation, I went about, now you're empowered when you come up to your next team meeting. Oh yeah, I've had experience. I know what I'm talking about, kind of. So just to go forward from that, we also have HR 525. Now that's sitting in the House of Representatives. It's a companion bill to the S134. Well, the S341 is the companion bill to HR 525, but the Senate bill is actually more important right now. We only have 10 co-sponsors. It said earlier there's none from Washington. It is introduced by Merkley and Leiden from Oregon. Now 525, you do have McDermott and Devine, I do believe. Thank you. They are co-sponsors on that, and right now on the House bill we have 65 co-sponsors. So a lot of forward movement right there. Now in addition, there is the Therapeutic Act and that's S1333. Now that is very particular to CBD. So that bill sets aside and is different because of the fact that it draws out CBD alone. Currently, right now, there are 10 co-sponsors on that bill, and I am absolutely shocked that Senator Roy Blunt from my home state of Missouri actually is a co-sponsor on that, when he actually sent my dad a message, an email, a formal letter saying that I myself am a detriment to society from the work that I do. Very interesting. Trust me, my dad was not so pleased in the letter that he wrote back. So in 2015, we had 6 new states come on with hemp legislation. So we're seeing a lot of forward movement right now. And as I said, with 27 states defining industrial hemp. Now, of those 27 states, not all of them have actually formulated the regulations or the paperwork to support those regulations to actually put some sort of hemp research in the ground in accordance with Section 7606. Now, another one of the topics that's coming up is talking about the Omnibus Bill, and this is the budget for the Department of Justice, which controls what the DEA technically does. There's been a new one that's come out just recently, and that's Section 763. And just to read this, this is talking about what happens as the movement of this material from state to state. It says, none of the funds made available by this act, which is essentially the budget to the DOJ, in contravention of Section 7606 of the Farm Bill, which facilitates the hemp research, or to prohibit the transportation, processing, sale, or the use of industrial hemp that's grown or cultivated in accordance with the subsection of this Section 7606 of the Agricultural Act within or outside the state in which the industrial hemp was grown or cultivated. So this essentially sets up and says that if you bring in under a DEA permit, that material is tracked throughout, no matter where it goes, it's tied to that DEA permit. But now we have a situation where states have actually had the stork has arrived. We love the cannabis stork. The stork has arrived and delivered them industrial hemp. Where did it come from? It came. Thankfully, the miracle came. So now they've got this material that now they're able to process it. So this actually says now that if you have this material and it's not tied to a DEA permit, well, it looks like we can move this material around. So now we're going to see what the states are going to do about this language and how it's being interpreted. Some people have misinterpreted this new language as saying, oh, we no longer require a DEA permit. Absolutely not. If you want to import a controlled substance, which cannabis all is, no matter industrial hemp or not, you're still going to have to go through the DEA permitting application process. It's actually very easy. There's like about 8 different blocks to fill in. And 2 of them are like, what port did it leave from and what port is it coming into? So it's a really kind of a very simple sort of process to go through to actually get that, just putting the paperwork in order. And part of that is knowing, what the DEA codes are. And on there, it actually says that you're importing marijuana. Because if you do or do not know, there's not a word for hemp when we start talking about these drug codes to import. So last year when I organized the variety trial for North Dakota State University, we brought in 12 different varieties from 3 different countries. I actually got a permit from the DEA to import marijuana. And I do want to say, today I actually got my permit in Canada, so now I'm completely licensed once again in Canada. So that was a nice thing to put the old feather in this cap today for the summit, is to actually get that, to be able to sell, import, process, and everything I do in Canada, along with being an authorized hemp sampler now for starting my 16th year in Canada being a hemp sampler in the field. And I still get emotional because I'm emotionally tied to our joint success and the global success that's going on right now as we look at the fact that we are part of an international global cannabis movement. So right now you've got the interesting stuff going on in like South Africa, for instance. Amazing. If you want to see a really cool project in Africa, look at Mickey's Kitchen. This is a woman who feeds 250 people today out of her soup kitchen on her pension. And we want to give a big shout out to the hipsters down there in South Africa that actually built her a hempcrete kitchen. So now she's able to feed those 250 people, including children, out of an actual kitchen that has tables and a sink, and not just a pot burning over a gas propane. So a couple of other regulations that I want to talk about is, one is our arbitrary THC level. 0.3%. Where the hell did that come from, right? That was essentially pulled out of a hat, kind of, and that was put in by Ernie Small. Not for sure if you know who Ernie Small is or not. He's just published a new great book, so you can definitely give a search out for Ernest Small or Ernie Small. And he's with the Canadian government at the time, and essentially they were put in a closed room, locked in the basement, and said, don't you dare come out until you've got those hemp regulations written. They had nothing to go on, and so the regulations that Canada wrote in 1998 are now the regulations that are shaping the industry around the world as they're looking to those regulations to shape their regulations. Are they perfect? By no means. We had a formal red tape commission come forward from Health Canada reviewing the regulations, and that was all of Health Canada's Office of Controlled Substances sections. They were all reviewed, and the hemp section came up with the most red tape, because we're technically an agricultural crop. So right now, we are essentially demanding the fact that we remove the hemp industry from the Office of Controlled Substance and given to Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. We are an agricultural crop. We want to be moved away from needing to have a criminal record check every single year. And you know, some of these growers have been cultivating industrial hemp since 1998, and they still have to get a criminal record check every single year. Now, you know, okay, it's $15, so what? You go down and you do it, you submit the thing, you get your permit back. Once again, it's a pretty easy thing to do, but these are farmers, they're not criminals. So, you know, these are things that we're asking to do. Another thing we're asking to do is remove the 10-acre minimum. So what about some of our smaller farmers in Nova Scotia or New Brunswick, perhaps, that actually don't have 10 consecutive acres, but maybe have 8 acres, and then another 8 acres, because this is how their lands are divided up in these smaller parcels. And so there's limitations on the fact of growing the industry, even in the Canadian sector, even though we've been growing the industry around the globe on the food side of things since 1998. So to further that, another big topic for me is, well, what is cannabis? Okay, so our colleagues in the marijuana world call marijuana cannabis, and then people come and say, oh, wait, hemp is cannabis too, but I thought cannabis was this other thing. So to really look at how we're using the language and what that means come Customs Border Patrol scenario, especially on the hemp side of things. Once again, we have like the word hemp seed. Okay, well, hemp seed being 2 words is something we plant in the ground because that's part of a pedigreed seed system. And that's the maintenance of that variety. And we're depending on cross-pollination, which one of the things we heard earlier was about the importance not only of the female, but of the male pollen too. Well, in hemp, we have male pollen. We have that highly genetic diversity, and it wants to change. And so that's why the maintenance programs in industrial hemp and our pedigreed seed production are so important. So I just want to thank everybody for your time and for inviting me, and I look forward to your questions.
Hi, I'm Don Stevens. I am the mayor of North Bonneville, which is a small town on the Columbia River in southwest Washington. We have a population of 1,005. And our city is the home to the only government-owned marijuana store in the world. Quick background, I was a high school sophomore in Oak Ridge, Oregon in 1973 when Oregon became the first state in America to decriminalize marijuana. And being a sophomore in high school, I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to politics at that point. And I'm sure the legislature had great ideas and reasons for what they did. But as high school students, what we determined right away was we now became pot smokers, because if we got caught with a beer, we got a $250 fine, a minor in possession charge on our record, taken down to the police station, and our parents were called to come pick us up. Obviously not something high school sophomores are interested in. If we got caught with marijuana, the cops took the marijuana and a pipe or bong if you had one and sent you home. So whether they meant to or not, the Oregon legislature in 1973 incentivized a whole generation of students to, anyone under the age of 21, you were far better off to smoke than you were to drink. I don't know if any of them still lose sleep over that or not, but that was the end result. So basically I've been training for over 40 years for this job, I guess is the takeaway. I was a member of NORML. I joined the Marines in 1975 when I got out of high school, and I thought in 4 years, by the time I get out of the Marines, this stuff will all be legal. I was off by about 36 years. But I'm happy to see it finally happening in our lifetime, and my town has been, very involved in a new model. When 502 passed, I-502 passed in 2012, our city council sat down and said, okay, well, what's this mean to us as a city? And we determined that a public development authority, which is the construct of a municipal corporation in the state of Washington, would allow us to create a municipally owned and operated store. There's a firewall, if you will, between the PDA and the city. They're not really related in any way. No liability from the store can come back on the city, which is very important to government and the concerns that you have. But the plus side was, had we allowed an entrepreneur to be determined to come in and set up a pot store, we might have got a great owner, or we might have got not so great an owner. And had it been a not so great owner, the legal process to try and shut that business down would have been incredibly obtuse, because no one even was sure how you could start the stores up at that time, let alone shut them down. So by doing this, the city council voted to create a public development authority. They sat the first 5-member board down and said, okay, go off and create your business plan, your articles of incorporation, get your business license, apply for your cannabis license from the LCB, and stay out of trouble. And they've been able to do that very well. And 502 passed about 55-45-ish on a state level, and it was about the same in both Skamania County and in North Bonneville. And so during the public hearings that the council had to create this authority, we had people from the town come in and speak, and the percentages were about the same. A little over half were in favor, a little less than half, but not much less, were not. And we got a lot of comments. What you may have seen the shirt I'm wearing, it's a Reefer Madness poster, and at the bottom it says, not a documentary. We actually had a person come to a city council meeting in public comment and tell us that a pot smoker could quit smoking pot, and 2 years later could be playing with their kids at the playground, have a flashback to marijuana, and murder their children in the playground, and then not even remember it later on. So people ask me about this shirt. I'm telling you, there are people out there that believe all this stuff still. So a big part of all of our job in this room is education. And really going to change it, and I really focus on words matter. Nothing in the whole 502 process has infuriated me more than the term recreational marijuana. Do you go to a recreational liquor store? Do you buy recreational cigarettes? No, it's retail marijuana. If you have to differentiate it between medical and other uses, call it social, call it retail, it's not recreational. Although I have to say, Father Tom, I mountain bike and snowboard and skated myself, and there is a more than just a grain of truth in that, fueling the extreme mentality. At any rate, we're here to talk about policies and that kind of thing. One of the things that also infuriated me with 502 was, for advertising purposes, you were allowed one sign on your building, grand total of 1,600 square inches. They use inches because 1,600 sounds a lot better than smaller than 3 foot by 4 foot, which is what that is. So, in compliance with the law, we have our little teeny sign on the side of the building that says Cannabis Corner. Well, one of the things that they don't regulate in 502 is your address sign. The initial address of the building where our store is was 484 Evergreen Drive. But the landlord wanted to split the property, so we had to assign a new address. We chose 420. There's now a sign that's about 6 feet long and about 4 feet high on top of the building that says 420 Evergreen in white and green writing. It complies with the policies. It doesn't break any rules. This is the kind of creative answers that we are all charged with coming up with in the future. One of the other things that happened when 502 was first written, Olympia was going to take all of the excise money, 25% at all 3 steps of the process, and keep it. They weren't going to give any of it back to the cities and counties. And in my opinion, that's why there are a lot of counties in eastern Washington in particular who have a moratorium on it. The LCB had changed that now. They're doing 37% tax at retail, and they're returning money to cities and counties and municipalities if they have an active 502 business. We have the only active 502 business in Skamania County, and so the end result is our county gets thousands and thousands of dollars every year because we have that store there. When we first were discussing the whole development of this public development authority, the Skamania County Sheriff, who provides law enforcement services for our city, came to one of the meetings and said, I don't want any of our contract money being paid for with marijuana money. And I said, Dave, they just give us a check for sales tax. They don't tell us how much of it came from pot, how much came from alcohol, gambling, tobacco, all the other things. And so for the last year, it's been sort of dicey. I mean, they recognize it's legal, they know they have to enforce the law, but I just had a meeting with he and his deputy, and he has actually changed his view almost 180 degrees. He now recognizes after a year in operation that the world has not come to the end. High school students are not all dropping out and smoking weed constantly. And it's just really gratifying to see people who are willing to be open-minded. And look, when our pot store first opened last March, we had probably almost 20% of the people who came in the store the first week were local residents who almost verbatim, every one of them walked up to the door, held up their driver's license, and the first thing they said was, I don't want to buy any marijuana, I just want to look inside the store. They thought it was going to be like an opium den with people passed out in the corners, and it's not. It looks like a Starbucks or a yogurt shop. It's all open airy, nice and clean. The bud tenders are very friendly and non-threatening. And I've had tons of people who originally spoke in opposition who come up to me in the supermarkets and in the post office and say, hey, this really isn't working out that bad. And they're starting to see the benefits of it. We're never going to eliminate the black market, but we can really minimize it a lot. And I think part of the reduction in taxes was the LCB recognizing that people will pay a premium to buy legal rather than black market. And I equate it to a growler fill or a beer store. You can brew your own beer, that's great, but you can go down the street and choose from 200 different kinds of craft brews. It's the same with a pot store. If you buy your pot from Bob out of the back of his 63 Chevy, he's got this bag of weed, and that's what you get. If you go to the pot store, you've got 20, 30, 40 kinds. You've got indicas, sativas, hybrids, cookies, chocolate, ground coffee, topicals, tinctures, vape stuff. It's smorgasbord. And people will pay some kind of premium for that. They won't pay double, but they'll pay a little extra for that choice. And so I really think that is all of this is starting to come. I like it. I'm not quite old enough to remember prohibition with alcohol, but I'm sure the first few years after that was reversed. You had the Salvation Army drummers pounding down the street saying demon rum's going to destroy our country, and then a few years later they're all sitting around having a beer afterwards. So we're headed down that same path, and it's up to all of us to keep fighting the good fight and educating everybody out there.
Hi, my name is Mitzi Vaughn. I'm the managing attorney at Greenbridge Corporate Counsel. We're a law firm that serves the cannabis community. We are, and only the cannabis community, in ancillary businesses and complex transactions. Our clients operate nationally and internationally, down to locally. So that's not why I'm here particularly though, but my position with the firm has afforded me opportunities to be involved in a number of organizations, such as I'm a founding board member for the National Cannabis Bar Association. I am on the advisory council for Students for Sensible Drug Policy. I'm, for purposes of this discussion, on the founding committee for the ad hoc U.S. Coalition for Global Drug Policy Reform. They did not consult me about the name. So don't blame me for that, and that's the last time you're going to hear the entire phrase. I'm just going to call it the coalition, not to be confused with our new coalition here, which I'm super excited about. But I'm here to talk a little bit about going from local all the way up to international in the way that we think about drug policy. So there's been a lot of discussion here today about participating locally, educating people. I'm a former professor. I love educating people. That's how we operate on a local and state level. What I'd like to do today is kind of open some folks' eyes to the opportunities that exist nationally and internationally, and the kind of problems that we are confronting on the international stage, and the power you actually have, even though you don't believe you might have it, to make that change. So, for example, 3 years ago, I was not in the cannabis industry. I've always been involved in social justice. Now, I'm the lead author of a letter that's going to be presented to every member nation state at the United Nations General Assembly special session on the world drug problem in Vienna in April. I'm also the lead author, one of the lead authors, I'm not alone, in a letter to President Obama about the execution of Indonesian drug offenders, low-level, nonviolent drug offenders that garnered national attention. And I'm in the process with the other lead authors of drafting a letter to the Obama administration regarding their stance on drug policy in anticipation of what's called the UNGAS. So that thing in Vienna is called the UNGAS for short. Because again, that's a really long thing you don't want to be saying over and over again. And so while we have enjoyed reform and progress, as painful as that sometimes may be here, abroad things are different. And in part that's because of our national drug policy expanding into the world. So, for example, almost everybody in this room is a nonviolent drug trafficker. Almost every single one of you, right? Raise your little private hand inside. I'm not one of those speakers who says, okay, everybody raise your hand inside, but you can if you want, right? Just be that way. Okay, so this past April, on April 29th, Indonesia put low-level, nonviolent drug offenders, just like you, up against a wall and shot them with a firing squad. All right? If you were in Indonesia and you were doing the exact same thing that almost every one of us are doing in this room, you could be subject to a firing squad. It was very public. It was terrible. These people were nonviolent for the most part. If you were in Iran and you got busted for doing what we do every day, they're going to hang you. Okay? That's what they do to execute you. There is a death penalty for nonviolent drug offenses in many, many countries that the United States provides funding to for drug interdiction. So our tax money is paying governments to assassinate people who are just like us. All right? I hate to be a downer, and for those of you who know me, I'm usually a pretty good time, but when I'm talking about this, I get a little upset. So, that's number one, right? Our national drug policy and our war on drugs has expanded throughout the globe with the impact of drastically raising rates of incarceration. And in this country, we see it with people of color. In other countries, you see it with other minority groups, depending on what country it is, exponentially increasing the rates of incarceration. In this country, more black men are in prison right now than were enslaved in this country in 1850. If you don't know that, you need to read The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. It will curl your toenails. It's horrible. It is an epidemic. Our rates of incarceration since we passed the Controlled Substances Act, I'm going to look down at my notes here. 1970, our prison population was under 200,000. The Controlled Substances Act was passed in 1970, but more importantly, 1971, the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, which is the primary international United Nations drug treaty, was also, not everybody signed it that year, if you know anything about international stuff, it takes a while, but that was when that kicked off, and that's what defines what a controlled substance is in this country, and in every country, all over the world. Who's a signatory, which is most countries. Nixon also kicked off the war on drugs, right? It was a soft opening, but that was 1971. By 1984, the prison population had doubled to 400,000. Okay, so that's between 1970 and 1984, 14 years. Since then, our prison population has increased in 2014 to 1,500,000 people. We are second in the world only to the Seychelles, which is completely random and I don't know what that's about, in the per capita number of people we incarcerate. Our prison industrial system is growing exponentially because we've privatized it. And get this, guess who's lobbying to keep cannabis as a Schedule I drug? The prison lobby. The prison lobby. The prison lobby. All right? That's what we're talking about here. This is a very complex and very scary thing to think about. That's what we're up against. We're making local change, we're making state change, but the wall that we're running up against with the federal government is not just DEA or DOJ intransigence. We're talking about a shitload of money, and we always talk about alcohol, we always talk about tobacco. Figure in the prison system and look up what the numbers, what the profits for those folks are. They don't want that cut in there. So, nationally, not only do we need to move reform forward here, but you, all of you, as business people in this state, Oregon, wherever you are going, I don't know where you're going, need to participate on the national level and need to participate in other states' campaigns to legalize. Because until we reach a critical mass, which hopefully will be in the next couple of years, we're not safe. I don't know what we're thinking, all right? As long as we do not have a majority of members in Congress, their constituents, behind legal cannabis, it can all go away. Do I think it will? No. But am I positive? No. And the more you reach out and help other states and help at a national level, the better you will be. Not just as a human being, because you're lowering rates of incarceration state by state, but as a business person. The faster we get to decriminalization, the better it will be for your business. And right now, you're struggling. You're struggling, and we're going through all kinds of growing pains with the LCB, and that's great, but why? Why? It's because of the way we're treating it at a national level, at the federal level. Don't lose sight of that as you're fighting your zoning and as you're fighting the LCB. It's really easy to keep your head down, but take a look up every now and then. One thing that not one thing, a cluster of things that the ad hoc coalition, or the coalition, is doing are, in this letter to Obama, which I can't unfortunately give to you yet, is to encourage our federal government to take a people-centered approach to the drug problem, all right? Drug users are not criminals. They are people who use a substance. Let's treat them like people. They're just people who take drugs. They are not drug users. Let's not stigmatize them. Let's, as a community, admit that we have people in our community that have addiction issues, and let's treat them as public health issues. Let's advocate that from local all the way up to international. Let's treat the root causes of those addictive behaviors. Let's talk about economic development in countries where the only thing you can do to make money is grow coca or grow opium poppies. So before we go and we throw helicopters with poison, which by the way are also poisoning the people, all over those plants, let's talk about giving these people a viable economic alternative to that before we ruin the crop. Let's not ruin the crop and then say, oh, by the way, we have this really groovy plan for you. Here's what you're gonna do, you're gonna make moccasins. No. No. And so the more you educate yourselves about these issues and the more you speak to each other, your family, your friends, and your community, you raise awareness, you write letters to the editor, you write letters to your senator, even our senators, right? Washington senators need to hear from us about international issues, right? They also need to hear from us about state issues. Don't get complacent and think that you can just sit back and Cantwell's going to take care of you. Cantwell needs to hear from you a lot. We need to stay vocal. We need to stay vocal locally. We need to show up at city council meetings, but we also need to stay vocal internationally. We have a lot of brothers and sisters out there who are dying. They're dying every day. They are women. They are children. Children are being thrown in prison for decades. Can you imagine spending 15 years in an Indonesian prison only to look down the barrel of a bunch of guns with a firing squad? So, stay connected, act, right? Take actions, advocate on behalf of our industry, but also on behalf of the world to deal with these issues, and join organizations that are advocating for change, and by joining them, your one voice becomes much larger. This ad hoc coalition started, this guy named Dave Warden, stopthedrugwar.org. It started with his idea, and now we have signatories that are the entire page of this handout. We have hundreds of NGOs signatories to this, including the ACLU. We have business members like Forefront Advisors in my firm, Greenbridge, and Harborside, and even, our names are going to go to the United Nations in support of this statement and in support of what we believe in. Almost everybody in this room believes in, I assume. And so what I'd like to ask you to do, because Ray is very big into, what can you do? What can you do? You can go downstairs to the registration desk after our last keynote speaker, downstairs in the lobby, and you can pick up one of these, and you can read it. And if you are part of an organization, whether it be a commercial organization, business organization, or a nonprofit, or whatever, you can contact Dave Warden and add your name to this list. And you can contact the people you know in other organizations and ask them to add their name to this list. And by something that simple, you can make a difference at the United Nations level. Thanks.
To add to what she just told you about the UN, each division of the UN then has supporting nonprofits to help support that division, and that works all around the world. So you don't have to deal just with the UN. You can also reach them through that nonprofit group, which magnifies your voice a great deal.
All right, thank you. First, I just want to thank the Washington Cannabis Summit for putting on this event. This has been one of the best cannabis-related events I've attended. I've just personally been really impressed by the level of conversation that's taking place. So I just want to, give you guys another round of applause for this event. There's also, it's not just the folks up here on the panels that are really interesting and just have so much information to share. A lot of you in this room are amazing people as well. I caught myself wondering, how many people in this room are, putting food on the table with marijuana money? I mean, that's about half the room here, just in this room alone. And when we're talking about job creation, I think that's something that's huge for the industry. One employee for 250 square feet, that is huge news. That's great for our industry. It means there are jobs here. We provide value to our communities. This is awesome. So to talk a little bit about myself, my name is Crystal Oliver. I am the managing member and co-founder of Washington's Finest Cannabis. We are a marijuana farm in Eastern Washington. We've been licensed by the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board since August of 2014. So I actually just finished out my second season and my second Washington State legal marijuana harvest. In the last couple of years, I've planted thousands of marijuana plants, pruned them, cloned them, harvested them. And that's been pretty cool. And to talk about the international issues, I know for me personally, as hard as this industry is to be in, and as hard as it is to be a farmer, I always make sure that I take time to appreciate what we have. Yes, there are problems with the integration of medical, and it doesn't look like it's going to be that smooth. But we have it so much better than so many people all over the United States and certainly internationally. So I always take time to reflect on that and feel blessed that I have the opportunity to grow some beautiful marijuana plants underneath the sun. And I'm not afraid that I'm going to be arrested or put in front of a firing squad. So this is an amazing place to be. Let's see, so I also found it funny, that the store brings hemp seeds. Well, when the enforcement officers asked me where I was getting my marijuana, I explained to them, Santa Claus was working on the off season that year. And then a little bit about some of the other work I've been doing in my free time, you know, because all you folks in the industry, you know there's a lot of that. I worked with Spokane, and primarily Spokane because that is where I'm based. I spent a lot of time organizing our local stakeholders there to work with our county commissioners to get reasonable zoning. To give you a little bit of an idea of, you know, what an accomplishment that was, initially Spokane County Commissioners had come up with a emergency zoning code that required these 300-foot setbacks from all of your property lines. And like for me personally, in my 10-acre parcel, under those codes, I couldn't use 97% of my property for marijuana cultivation. And my farmhouse was already on that 3% I could use. So it wasn't going to work for my business. I had my property, and you know, this zoning code came out, and I went, oh my gosh, we aren't going to be able to do this. You know, we've been dreaming, we've been planning, and we have this property, and we're not going to be able to do what we want with our property. You know, this isn't even Phil American, right? So you know, I got the farmers in Spokane engaged. We met several times, and you know, we talked about, you know, what could we change with the policy. We spent a lot of time working with our planning director and our building director and educating those folks about what we actually were, what we were actually going to be doing. In the end, I'm happy to report that not only did we get marijuana production and processing listed as an agricultural use on our zoning codes, but we also came up with, you know, a zoning provision that was, you know, balanced the interest of our neighbors with ours, and came out to be pretty reasonable. You know, we are able to, you know, produce marijuana in agricultural zones, and we're able to engage in limited processing in those zones as well. So it was a huge win for the marijuana farmers in Spokane. And there's a lot of folks in this room here who helped make that happen, because, you know, me by myself talking to someone who doesn't do anything, it takes us all. You know, we've all got to come together and, you know, educate those folks and represent, you know, to the world what this industry is about. Let's see, another issue that I worked on recently was with the Washington State Building Code Council. Chris Young mentioned that they did push through some regulations surrounding extraction that are, you know, they're quite impactful, and they're highly restrictive. They passed an emergency ordinance. They allowed us to provide input, but only in letters and, you know, 3-minute testimony. So it really wasn't enough. I spent a lot of time talking with the Building Code Council that, you know, they just needed to engage us more. We really needed to have like a committee where we were there sitting at the table, and there was a back and forth dialogue, because just sending letters and providing 3-minute testimony isn't really enough. If you bring us to the table, you know, we have this dialogue back and forth, we both walk away, you know, learning so much. And I'm happy to report that actually today the Building Code Council met to discuss the creation of a marijuana tag, a marijuana technical advisory group. Looks like there's going to be 15 people on that technical advisory group, and they're looking for industry representation. I think the only thing they have put in there is that they definitely want at least one from the west side and at least one from the east side, but those are a lot of spots to fill. It is an unpaid position, but you know, if you're a marijuana farmer in this room and you know about building codes and zoning codes, I'd encourage you to reach out to SBCC at ga.wa.gov and present yourself as, you know, a potential member of this tag. I think that's going to be really huge for the industry to have that dialogue here in Washington State. Let's see. Another thing I want to tell you about the SBCC. So they met today, so I have my husband calling in to listen to that and texting me what's going on, because I'm like such a junkie for all of this policy stuff. And he let me know that they did elect a new chair of that council as well. And it was actually one of the people that voted no on the F1 building codes for processing. So So I think that's pretty cool. I think we're definitely making some progress there, right? And the other win we had with the Building Code Council is we were able to convince them that no, marijuana growing is not more dangerous than every other type of agriculture, and no, you don't need to put F1 restrictions or building code requirements on greenhouses, which is something they were considering doing. They had an exception. And that was a huge thing. It would have been devastating to farmers using greenhouses, because they aren't constructed for that. It just would have been ridiculous. but we've seen our fair share of some ridiculous zoning codes and things like that. And so I guess I'll end by telling you about some of the things that I'm keeping my eye on and kind of encouraging you all to do that as well. I've always got my eye on the Washington State Liquor Control Board rules as they come out each week sometimes, more often than that. But certainly the most recent rules that they came out with, it has some interesting things in them. The allowance for outside financiers out of Washington State, that's going to be something that's very impactful to the industry. And I'll kind of reserve my comment on that, but it's something to definitely keep your eye on, think about, what that means for you and your business. And they had a couple other obscure things, like they want to add a Mr. Yuck sticker to all of our marijuana that's sold. Now, Mr. Yuck is usually used on chemicals that are hazardous to drink, and there's some research that indicates that children are actually attracted to the Mr. Yuck sticker. So, yeah, I know, right? I'm thinking that they made a mistake with that rule, and they're going to pull that one back pretty quick. But the other ones are pretty minor operational. Legislatively, I think we'll see some movement, but not a whole lot. It's a short session, so I'm not sure, how dramatic the changes will be at the legislative level this year for us. And then there's a third thing that I want to propose with kind of alerting the folks in this room about, something that should be of interest to you, is Pierce County is right now is looking at doing a ballot measure to have their citizens re-vote on legalization, on whether or not they're going to have recreational marijuana stores in there. I don't know if you guys are familiar. We've got Ted Weatherby out in Pierce County who opened his store against their ban and has been fighting and advocating. There's unlicensed businesses, but now they're trying to say they don't want any businesses there. There's going to be, and the other issue with that is it's going to be a special ballot, right? So they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to send out this special ballot for folks to vote on legalization again when they already voted yes in the first place. So I can tell you that I personally don't want to see a ballot measure like that go unnoticed. I don't want to see a ballot measure like that end up with the wrong people voting. So I'm personally going to be investing some of my time and energy to support Pierce County in anything that they need me to do. If it's calling voters to let them know about this ballot measure, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to invest my energy with it because we as an industry, we can't afford this lose. We want to make sure that, if the voters vote for it, they should be able to get it. And a city council that doesn't want marijuana shouldn't be able to just spend several $100,000 of their citizens' money to stop it from happening. So I encourage all of you to stay up to date on what's going on with Pierce County. And when they call you for help, when the word goes out and we know what we need to do to make this happen, you guys answer. And I have to tell you, there's a 90-day, this is going to happen in 90 days. So that is not much time. And it has been designed, I think, to come as quickly as possible so that we can effectively organize. But unfortunately, Pierce County doesn't know that marijuana smokers, sellers, are some of the best networkers in the world. And so I know that when they put out that call, you guys are going to answer, and we're going to do whatever we can to make sure that when voters vote yes for marijuana, they get it in their county.
So in a few moments, we'll go through the same pattern again. We've heard the word prohibition mentioned over and over today. So prohibition meant you couldn't get alcohol, correct? Right? That's actually wrong. You could go to your local pharmacist and buy medicinal pints and quarts. Okay? So all of that mindset about, well, you couldn't get it? No, you could actually get it quite well because it was medicinal. And the bottom line is that it didn't work anyway, as the process of having cannabis not being available isn't going to work anyway. So, one other statement, you mentioned Mr. Yuck sticker. So, Keith Boyce, Vice President of the Cannabis Alliance, and I have a connection with Mayor Baker of Kenmore, who is on the King County Board of Health and also the Washington State Board of Health. This is his issue, and it's his issue because children, he has no problem with cannabis. Okay? He has a problem with children getting a hold, because the parents aren't watching it, getting a hold of large doses from the medical arena. And Keith and I met with him as Keith is an industry representative to see what could be done. He is going to push for legislative change against that, but he would prefer not to. So those of you who represent that particular arena in this industry, I'm going to ask you to work with your political figures, especially Mayor Baker Kenmore, who's on the boards of health. He would like a fix for this that works for you. If that does not come, then we get Mr. Youngsters, which was originally designed to go on things like soap bottles that look like pot bottles. That's where it belongs, not here. So I'm going to encourage you, all of you in that arena of this industry, to start working with your local folks, especially Mayor Baker. So it is now question time. Deborah, do you have one yet? Okay, then I have 3 up here after that.
So a year from now, we're going to have a new resident in the Oval Office. There are certain candidates that are running for that privilege that have said, I think, a direct quote from one of them was, if I'm elected in Colorado, the party's over. Does the industry have a game plan to address that should this sort of crap happen?
Well, there's a simple question.
Okay, whenever I talk about national elective politics, I always have to say that I get my information from Rob Campia, Marijuana Policy Project. They've been prime movers behind the legalization pretty much in every state. And he is very good at political analysis. And so what we saw, let me back up. So if you had asked this question 6 months ago, the answer would have been, really, any Republican's going to be fine because of the Tea Party. The Tea Party wields disproportionate power in the Republican Party, and they don't want states' rights infringed, even if they think marijuana is demon weed, they think it's our business, stay the blank out, okay? So even people who make these giant, grandiose statements about how, Chris Christie, for example, they are somehow going to shut it all down. Their party is hogtied on that issue. If you had talked to everybody in this policy arena 6 months ago, again, they would have said our worst enemy is Hillary Clinton. Unfortunately, because she has actually affirmatively said in the past, she's affirmatively had stances that were pro-drug war stances, and in fact were harsher than some of former administrations. What we got to see, which was absolutely phenomenal, was her getting backed out of those positions by Bernie Sanders in his race. And whether or not you think Bernie should be president, you should send him a thank you note, because he brought that issue to the core. Rand Paul, strangely, brought that issue to the core. It's weird bedfellows in politics and cannabis. It's going to continue to be. So the short answer is, nationally, there isn't a lot of concern based on the rhetoric we are hearing right now. But all it takes is one bad PR trip and an opponent in office to bring it all crashing down. But it's going to take something that changes the public perception of our industry and changes of the momentum that we have right now.
was going to say, from the Canadian perspective, we're fortunate now to have Justin Trudeau in place, and we have, needless to say, high hopes for what he's going to do for not only our general access, but through our MMPR setup in Canada. So it's interesting. We have our own beast of bourbon there, but thankfully now I can get my medical cannabis delivered to my rural country store, and in my post office box I get a little note that says, "You have mail," and then I pick up my medical cannabis. So on that side, from the Canadian perspective, it'll be interesting to see the impact that we get from Canada into the U.S. From what Justin will do. And it's funny because we all call it by his first name. So,
And one more thing, I'm sorry to follow up, and this will be super quick. There's a difference between how nationally we are viewing adult use versus medical, and the way Congress is moving. Medical is as safe as it can be because Congress has critical mass behind protecting medical and hemp. So hemp started it, and there's enough publicity, frankly, thanks to a lot of epileptic children, which we're sorry they're suffering, but they have made far more convincing arguments just by their existence and their cures. Than a lot of us could have imagined. And we are thankful that they are healed, or at least improved greatly by these products. But medical looks pretty darn safe. It's fighting the descheduling versus moving it down a notch.
And the last thing I'll say, I don't know what the politics side will be, but I can tell you that the people of the states that have already legalized it will make those 24 Vanilla Isis caliphate people in Burns look like a drop in the bucket. if anybody, I mean, we all know Americans, you get a treat, it's a treat for the first 2 days, and then it's part of your daily routine from then on. So it's not going away.
Okay, I've got the next 3 questions.
Question primarily relating to the cross-state stuff that you alluded to, Anndrea, but it goes into a legal question and others might want to go into. Within a regulated market, we're trying to get generally some potency. You know, there's THC in the product and things like that. Whereas you're mentioning this 0.3% cutoff. When you said that, something clicked in my head. I took a look. Looking at 25,000 flower samples in Washington tested through August, 5 of them had less than 0.3% THC max, the proper total THC, to be vaccinated. That was interesting to me. So it's non-zero. They all had very high CBD THC ratios, average of 23.89, ranging from 14 to 1, 30 to 1. The question, those by many of the definitions are not cannabis, marijuana. They sound almost more like hemp. I am wondering, in terms of getting our good medicine out to people, can we leverage the confusion on 0.3% plus that cross-state thing to send Washington legally grown hemp at less than 0.3% THC to those poor people in Oregon? They can't grow their own milk.
we got to get this being a hemp state. So that's part of the situation right now, is that's all ties back into Section 7606 of the Farm Bill. So we've got to put the positive pressure here so that at least if we get some recognition that we can function underneath Section 7606, then that 763 section would apply here for transport. Now, it comes back to the question about resins and HIA versus DEA and the definition, and actually what that means when it comes to CBD particularly, or any other cannabinoid. And I want us all to be out of the CBD bubble because we know there's more than one important cannabinoid.
You're here!
So, you know, we're not only selling CBD nowadays, so it's important on that concept, but there is an opportunity for the state of Washington to become Section 7606 compliant. And then, you know, we have high hopes, again, that before Obama will leave, that he will just make, you know, a wide stroke and fix our hemp situation in the United States and align us with the rest of the world, really, as we start talking about the movement on industrial hemp, which is distinct legislatively legal language from what our colleagues are doing in the medicinal or in the marijuana industry.
Okay, our next question.
Hi, this is, I'd just like to hear your feelings on my opinion on what the situation is that, let's see, has gone through my head. As we all know, cannabis was originally outlawed, not really based on people smoking pot, but it was the commodities industries, it was because everyone can grow pot, and not everyone can own petroleum land or timberland, etc. And we're moving into a new technological paradigm and a new economic paradigm, because everything on our planet right now is run by economics. And it's going to be more based on intellectual properties. So it's also going to be based on carbon technologies, carbon nanofibers. Moore's Law actually craps out in 2020. We're going to need carbon transistors in order to make everything work. 3D printing will most likely be entirely carbon-based. So I think it's actually in the power structure's best interest to have us all growing massive amounts of hemp. And although I disagree with this, my sources tell me that they think that us all being stoned will equal to their Brave New World mindset. I disagree. But just curious your opinions on that, if it might just all be food, bread and circus show, everything going on here, and in fact they're merely trying to stall out for the paradigm shift, and because they just have egg on their face and they have to pretend they're learning this all along with us.
Okay, well, I guess it was directed to me. Thankfully, I'm not getting the egg in the face. Even though you don't need a rooster to get eggs, so we all know that one. Well, I guess in the situation is that, I mean, is there a pie in the sky with industrial hemp? Can it do so much? Absolutely. But where we have to focus really right now is, basically these variety trials. So we can talk about how good this is, but until we have stable cultivars, and that was one of the things that Jay spoke about, is having these stable cultivars so that what these farmers are growing, at the end of the day, their farm gate is going to be increased. Because without the farmer, none of us have a job anymore. So it's really key that the farmer becomes successful. Now we see in Manitoba, which we're talking about a place that has a way less population in the United States, is if we have one crop failure, the news there travels 60 miles. And we have to combat that one crop failure with all of those farmers in the region, and we don't even have the breadth of stretch that we have here in the United States. So the stable varieties are definitely going to be key to develop all of those said things. Now, it doesn't mean that, we may be growing for a particular cultivar the same way that we're doing with the wines or in the marijuana industry, is growing that particular cultivar in a particular region to supply a particular marketplace. Does hemp belong in cultivation everywhere? Maybe not. Why? Maybe we have what I call the natural cannabis cultural clash. Trust me, I don't want, that's something that has to come into place. We have to recognize that as an industry, embrace each industry as a united front, because we all are part of that cannabis industry, and how to focus that by really looking regionally what's going to fit best for each marketplace.
Oh, can I say, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but there's a couple things that I wanted to say in regards to your question. I wanted to let you know that, marijuana didn't become illegal only because of, manufacturing and economic influences. It had a lot to do with race and racism. And if you look at it now, you look at those statistics, that's still the case. So I just wanted to, clarify that.
My story is called Reefer Day and Marijuana Shop, making fun of that exact concept.
Okay.
Marijuana Day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, our next question.
Well, first off, thank you guys so much. This has been so informative today. My name is Daniel Harrington. I'm a managing partner at Kush Comfort Farms, I-502 producer processor on the east side. Today's been just awesome, and I just had a few things I want to bring forward. I don't know if it's going to be a specific question to anyone up here. Okay, so from what I've been reading, recently Cristina Sanchez, a molecular biologist from Madrid, Spain, she's been doing 10-year studies on the endocannabinoid system, and she put out there in her words that THC induces tumor cells to commit suicide while leaving the healthy cells alone. And so we have this understanding that cannabis is a cultural valuable crop. It is definitely deeper than our cilantro and our connection with beets. But I want to stand up and raise awareness about cannabis truth. I have children. I have 3 children at home. So right now we have breast milk being the first endocannabinoids delivered to a baby, and now we have 21. And so this gap, in my own understanding as a father, as an owner of a business, is definitely a passionate musician and care about cannabis from seed all the way to the fine presentation we all enjoy. So my son, I challenge us, thinking in this room as we're taking our intellectual and understandings to the summit, what do we offer children? We know that it can help with behavioral issues. We know that it's an amazing medicine. At the same point, I believe in cannabis. I smoke it. I truly believe in its medicinal benefits. But between when my son is weaned, which he is, our daughters aren't, but in between he's 21, what is this gap and what are we offering? And so with our understanding of CBDs, the whole cannabinoid spectrum, terpenes. I guess I put a challenge out there, and also I know it can be a sensitive topic. We don't want to offer cannabis to children, but I definitely believe that there's a better offer that we can say, or that we can give them something more, and maybe the CBD research that we might be able to bridge some studies that it is a legal realm below the 0.3 THC level, that there can be some legitimate studies that can help branch and bridge that understanding over. So yeah, once again, thank you guys.
Thank you. Go for it.
No, you do. Oh, yeah, well, yeah, okay. You know. Well, no, I don't, maybe not. Well, I think it's a definitely interesting question. I mean, legally giving cannabis to children, and I don't have any myself, but definitely know friends that do. And it would like to be able, and their hands are tied. I mean, bless those ones in Missouri right now, for instance, that have their hands completely tied on giving. I don't know what the answer is to that. Give it to them anyways? Make it home? I mean, I think it's a tough question when it comes to how do we break that gap between the mother's milk and the legal age to go purchase on their own. I'm not for sure what that front's going to be like and how we're going to handle it as a united front by still being responsible parents, but fighting for the rights of our children too, because that's a part of what we're doing, is we're fighting for the rights for ourselves right now so that we can actually give what we do today as a united front away to our children and to the next generation, so that we have an understanding. I had an interesting conversation when we were at the Portland Hemp Stop with some teenagers about the difference 3 years ago in what was going on in school and what was happening with their teachers, and then today. And I'll tell you, in the last 3 weeks, I've sent off 4 hempcrete kids to schools for science projects. So we're starting to see that change happening on the student academia versus one of our friends in the state of Missouri, which actually was removed from being a substitute teacher because in a county that has the Battle of the Hemp Bells in Lexington, Missouri, during Missouri History Week, he spoke about the Battle of the Hemp Bells, which is a museum that the kids go to in that town. He was asked no longer to come back because he taught about a controlled substance. So these are other issues that we are dealing with when we start talking about the educators in the United States being removed from their positions about bringing up, we're not even talking about marijuana, this is talking about here's a rope, and its rope is made from hemp, and then you're released from your substitute teaching job. So there's other battles that we've got to fight when it comes to academic freedom also.
Hey, here's the next question. Hello, my name is Bob L. from Red Frog in Monroe, Washington. We are greenhouse farmers, Tier 3, and one of the major impetuses we see to being able to move forward is Washington State's continuation of cannabis as a non-agricultural crop. It's very important for us to be able to do this as a farm activity with the associated ability to have right to farm, the ability to use a greenhouse, the ability to process in a U building rather than in an F1 building meant for hazardous materials. These are non-hazardous agricultural packaging activities. Is there any comment from the group in front for how to make it so that it is an agricultural crop within Washington? Thank you.
All right, that's a quick question. There's a lot of different things that are taking place right now to, move that conversation forward. I mentioned before, in Spokane County, we got our zoning code to classify marijuana production and processing as an agricultural use, and that has been, it's in the final adoption, that's on our books. So I could call that like a little tiny win, right? There's a lot of times when they say we're not, like the Washington State Department of Agriculture says we're agriculture, okay? And who else says we're agriculture? Oh, L&I says that our employees are agriculture workers, okay? And so for me, the only people who are telling me that I'm not agriculture are usually quoting a WAC that has to do with Department of Revenue taxes. Now that WAC is only as far as taxation. Of course I'm a new industry and I'm making a lot of money and I'm not going to get a tax break because I don't, and the reason for those tax breaks is so that farmers can effectively compete with farmers in other states. That's why they have those tax breaks in place. Of course I'm not going to be subject to those tax breaks. And that's usually the WAC that somebody is quoting when they're telling you you're not agriculture. I know we have the Washington State, or we have the Cannabis Commission, and they're making, good steps forward. Once we have a marijuana commission, I think that everyone recognizing this as agriculture will come very, very quickly. But yeah, I'm of course with you. I want to see us treated as agriculture. I knew it was going to be hard to be a marijuana farmer, but I never imagined how many times I would have to explain to elected officials and regulators that a plant is a plant.
And just to second what Crystal said, I think the fastest way you're going to see that happen is the creation of the commission. Hands down. If you have a cannabis commission, you are an agricultural product. So if you care about it, get on board with those folks.
Next question.
Hi, I'm Mitzi Vaughn, President of the Bellingham City Council, and we have a population of about 85,000. I have a quick statement and a question. First of all, the reason I'm here is because 6 weeks into office, a processor reached out to me and said, hey, we have moral pressure on the mayor and this isn't right. I'm following all the regulations. So 6 weeks in, all of a sudden, I became an advocate for the cannabis industry. And I'm so glad that she's here. She's probably here today.
Danielle Roth.
Yes. So what I want to say is that reach out to your local elected people, know who they are, talk to them, educate them, get them through their fears. My question, and thank you, panel, for talking about policy and politics, because it is our step forward. My question is how do we get people to move through the fear of government regulation and policy and to step up for political positions and to talk about the importance of voting? And I don't think we talk about that enough. How do we get people to be motivated and inspired to encourage them to vote and encourage all their friends and neighbors to do so?
Yeah, I think
Free weed. Oh.
Oh, look what I found in the parking lot.
I'll be happy to talk to that mayor for you. One mayor to another.
Well, and so I wanted to speak about that because my husband and I we've been advocates. We were advocates for marijuana legalization before it became legal. So we weren't in the black market, we weren't in the medical market. We came here as advocates, and we helped gather signatures for I-502, helped gather voter registrations for I-502. And when it passed, we didn't initially think we were going to go into the business, but we looked at the rules. They were small business friendly, and we said, we're not done being advocates yet, so let's get some skin in the game, and then we can really push this conversation forward. And it's been really exciting. As far as getting folks out to vote, I know recently my husband set up a normal booth at one of the actually this summer he set up a normal booth at one of the retailers and collected voter registrations there, and I think that's huge. I'm always so disappointed that felons in Washington they don't realize that they can reapply for their voting rights, and that is huge. And a lot of people in this room, you might know a couple of felons. And they might think that they can't vote or they can't reapply for their voting, their voting rights. But make sure that they're informed. And I'm kind of a busybody, so when I'm talking to my friends or my family members, I ask them if they vote, and I talk about politics, and I might give them my opinion about some things. But I think that's important. It's that education piece. Is so key. When somebody asks you what you do you lie to them or do you tell them the truth? Well, I tell them the truth, and then I see what the reaction is. And you know what? Sometimes that's an opportunity to educate someone, and that's going to make a difference. So, I'm a big proponent that every single person makes a difference. I think running for office, I think that's a really great thing. In Spokane, one of our city council members is a licensed 502 marijuana farmer, and she just got reelected. So, clearly. Her name's Karen Stratton. She's, wonderful, progressive gal. She does a really good job for us there. But it was awesome to see her get, reelected, even though she was a marijuana farmer. And we're talking about an average American city, folks. Spokane is average America. So, you know, if it works there, you know, I think it's going to work anywhere. You know, and now in Spokane County, and of course I speak a lot about Spokane because that's where I'm from, and there's, you know, a decent amount of people there, so maybe, you know, it matters. But in Spokane County, this next election cycle, we're going to have 2 county commissioners up for re-election, and actually one of them, who is the former chair, just stepped down from his position. So that position that's now that's going to be run for in November, you're not even up against an incumbent. So there's definitely, you know, some opportunities for, I think, more marijuana, you know, industry folks to, you know, consider going into politics. But I'd say, you know, definitely, you know, if you don't know who your city council members are, and if you don't know who your county commissioners are, then you're not doing your job as a business owner. You need to know who those people are, you need to engage them, you need to educate them, and you need to show them who we are, because, you know, we're not, you know, reefer madness, we're not something scary, you know, show up in their office and just, you know, get to know them, go to events where they're going to be there, introduce yourself as a marijuana farmer, a marijuana retailer, a marijuana processor, you know, and stand tall when you do it.
Okay, have we have one other comment and then more questions?
Just stand tall, exactly. I was a volunteer art teacher for my son's elementary school, and I was the vice president of the Parent-Teacher Student Association, and every single person in all of those organizations and in the school know what I do. That's important. It's not just advocating within our community. Get out there, volunteer, give back, and let them know who you are. That's it.
Let them see the stereotype is incorrect. Next question.
Well, I'd just like to say, by a little conservative county of Lincoln County, when we first got our license, the sheriff and his deputies came out to visit to take a tour because they were to see what we were doing. Totally great about it. Happy to see the legalization. This is one less thing he has to worry about.
Yeah.
No more enforcement of stupid rules. But my question is around that 0.3% on the THC. How is that determined? Is it on a wet weight basis? Is it on a dry weight basis? Is it on a full plant basis? Is it on the bud basis? And has there been any enforcement around the margins of whatever that measurement calculation is?
That is based on when 50% of the kernels are set in the seed head, or at technical maturity when the fiber is taken down. So that's when the test actually is occurring, or that's when you're pulling the sample from the plants. There's certain regulations saying that you've got to pull a minimum of 60 plants, and then that's going to give you a composite sample of what's going on in the field. So in the grain production, we're pulling those when 50% of the kernels are resistant to compression. Essentially means that the seed will have a little bit of give to it. And then there's dried down, so it's on clean, dry weight of only the green parts of the plant, so the flowering head. That's when it is. So let's just say in Canada, if you had a test result that came back at 0.32%, would they completely make you destroy everything? No. We also have a further regulation, which I did not talk about, which was 10 parts per million actually THC on all of the derivative products. So in the Canadian industry, we have not only do we have to test in the field, however, we do have an exemption. So if your cultivar for 3 years consecutively comes under 0.15% THC, you are now exempt as a producer level from taking a THC test. So we are making forward movement of releasing hemp from that concept of needing to be tested as a drug.
Okay, I have the next question.
And it's true, our definition here in America, though, is on a dry weight basis. That's actually in the definition. So Canada's a little different than us. The dry weight is there. Anndrea, can you explain for us a little bit more? I'm not sure if everyone in the audience understood. When we talk about that DEA permit, it's actually the Controlled Substances Import and Export Act permit. And of course, there's nothing unlawful or Schedule 1 about industrial hemp at all. There's only a few things that are Schedule 1, right? Cultivation, viable seeds, and technically the resins, which we're working on. Can you explain what you mean when you say it's a controlled substance that we have to import? You're only talking about...
Well, in that case, I am speaking particularly about viable seeds for planting. Or, and I guess in the case for processing. So essentially what happens is that you first apply for your DEA registration, and then you get that, and then you can apply for the subsequent DEA permits to actually then move that material around or do whatever you're going to do with this technically a controlled substance. I'm not sure, Joy, if that sort of answers what you were looking at. And then it goes through a sort of process to clear customs, and you've got, and technically The DEA permit is more about facilitating the movement and also getting the export permit from the country. So if we look at that kind of timeline, by the time I get the DEA permit to get my export permit out of Canada, it can take up to 60 days to do that. So in this look, it's kind of time inhibiting because I want to have those seeds in place by the end of May in most places, which means that I've got to have that DEA permit on the go by the end of this month. So all of the projects that I'm working on, those DEA permits are going in before January 31st because sure in hell I want to have those DEA permits back to me in no time. And building a good rapport with those officials, when I go to Customs Border Patrol, I literally had him come out to shake my hand. Right? I was pulled in so that the Customs Border Patrol guy could shake my hand. And those are the kind of relationships that you want to build by having a positive attitude and communicating with them and actually empowering them to be part of our solution.
Here's our next question.
Mayor Stevens, I really am curious about your model. You know, I've come out and visited your store. I think it's the coolest store in Washington State. How do you do it? You got 1,000 people in your town and only 3,000 in your county at large. And I know you got like 6 employees?
9 total, so
9
couple of
employees. How the heck are you making any money? And where's that money going to? And then to follow up, if we have 9 employees at your store, are those now quasi-city employees? Are they, you know? And what does that mean? Right?
Sure. All right.
Okay, let's make it for the board. We're running out of time, so I want your answers to be right on the spot.
Right. They are municipal employees. They are not city employees. The store is a separate municipal corporation, so there's no interaction legally between the two entities. We initially started out with the plan of having not only a good living wage, but they get full benefits. They get retirement as public employees that are in perks. They also get health benefits. And we don't make as much money as a lot of the bigger stores in Vancouver and up here in Seattle and stuff do, but we're still, you know, more than breaking even. They have I estimate another year probably before they'll retire all the debt that it took them to start it up. But they will have retired a little over $250,000 of debt in 2 years, which means after that period goes by, we can look forward to profits somewhere in the $100,000, $125,000 a year plus. And then what they will do then, the city can't just get the money. They can't just give the money back to the city. But what they will do is they'll act as a grant authority, and the city, the county, and youth prevention programs, any kind of entity within the county will be able to apply to them for grant money for anything that is of a public health or safety, youth diversion prevention programs, all that kind of thing.
You have to salute creative people. A round of applause. Next question.
My question was for Dr. Hagler. You mentioned earlier that it would be a benefit to the industry for employers and employees to work together to find mutually agreeable solutions to things. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that, and then also how collective bargaining agreements, collective employment agreements can benefit not just the workers and the employers, but also the community and the economy as a whole.
So go ahead and answer that question. We will have one more, and then we're going to move on.
I'll try to be succinct. My response to the unionization problem is the fact that there's this gap in federal law. And I think what needs to be done is an innovative solution involving a cooperative approach. And that's why I recommend this idea of this pre-Wagner Act relationship where employees and employers work together. You don't need formal certification to have representation and a voice. And I think that works out because there is this uncertainty about whether the federal National Labor Relations Act will apply. There's a long history of this in the United States. I have an article coming out in the Journal of Management History in a few months. I'm sure you'll get your copy in the mail. No, it's a very arcane subject, but I think it's taken on a new life in the United States because of all these issues about labor management relations and inequality. And I'm happy to hear the mayor talk about the fact that down there they pay a living wage, but maybe they're doing that because they're municipal employees, and if they were private sector, it might be different. So I think the more stability that's gained through these kinds of relationships, the better the model transfers. And if it goes to other states, then they can look to this state as a model. And I have to say Colorado is a terrible model because our labor relations are just all over the place and they're not very functional, but in the state of Washington, I think it's more so and more regulated, if you will, and there's a better statutory basis. So that's why I say this is an opportunity for innovative relations that might transfer throughout the industry.
Last question.
Hi, my name is Reverend Sweet Baby Jesus. I'm the founding minister of Heaven Bound 420 Cannabis Ministry, Seattle's first non-denominational Holy Ganja Church. We are currently working on holding our first congregational meet next Friday, and we're working on getting situated on tribal lands. We are registered with the United Federation of Cannabis Churches, and we currently have more than 50,000 followers on social media. Now we're really excited, and we want our ministry to be open to everyone, not just on tribal lands, but everywhere else. Especially with all the hype that we're getting and all the people that are interested in us, there's a lot of chapters that want to come over for Heaven Bound 20. Now my question is, with the current law not letting cannabis clubs in Washington, where does that leave us? Are we protected under the right of the freedom of religion? And also, we are currently working on petitioning the DEA to allow us to use cannabis as a sacred ritual for our religious purposes.
It is me. That's you. This is so interesting because I actually, I'm of Native American descent and did policy work in law school about RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And the short answer is you're not likely to succeed in any of it. Federally recognized tribes have been able to get allowances exempting them from the Controlled Substances Act in connection with their religious practices, not necessarily based on RFRA, which was actually overturned and then reincarnated and has this kind of crazy history, but because of the relationship between the tribes and the federal government is a special one legally. Because, as we all know, we just absolutely devastated their culture. We're supposed to now be have a special relationship with them that affords them more freedoms to recoup what they lost. That is not the case with what you are planning. That doesn't mean that I think what you're planning is wrong. It means that unless you are basing it on established historical traditions, or you have that special federally recognized relationship with the federal government, you're unlikely to get a dispensation, certainly not from the DEA. That one's not going to happen. But I'll be interested to follow what happens with your efforts on tribal lands. And as our policy progresses, in connection with cannabis, so will the approach in it. Maybe you don't need any kind of religious exemption soon, right? That's what we hope for.
I would just wish you good luck. It's a great thing. The biggest difference between a religion and a cult is how long they've been in existence, so just hang in there.
God, I wish I'd said that.
All right, a round of applause for our